Hi everyone, I truly hope that this finds you well. Well, today I want to tackle a slightly different topic of thought and to look at our current circumstances from a leadership perspective. So here's a question. As leaders, how should we approach leadership in times of crisis? Well, I believe that this is one of the most important questions we should be asking if we serve in any form of leadership whatsoever. You see, there is no doubt that leaders of significance are shaped in times of crisis. Think of people like the American President Franklin Roosevelt, or the British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, or even our very own President Nelson Mandela, and even leaders like Katharine Graham of the Washington Post in the 1970s. All extraordinary leaders who were shaped by crisis. Their leadership approach was shaped by the circumstances they found themselves in. Well, there's another leader who is also shaped by crisis, a leader whose exploits were recorded in Scripture and whose wisdom is worth pursuing even to this day. A leader called Nehemiah. He inspired a nation to do the impossible under fierce opposition, and we can learn a few valuable lessons from his leadership approach in Nehemiah chapter 5. So reading from verse 16, I also devoted myself to working on the wall and refused to acquire land. A little bit further on in verse 17, I asked for nothing, even though I regularly fed 150 Jewish officials at my table. In verse 18, yet I refused to claim the governor's food allowance because the people already carried a heavy burden. You see, his personal approach to leadership in crisis was self-sacrifice. And his self-sacrifice teaches us three aspects of leadership that we could learn and how we can shift our approach. Here's the first. He led from the front. He devoted himself to being a hands-on leader. And throughout the project of repairing the wall around Jerusalem, he wasn't looking to lead from the grandstands. Instead, he chose to get his hands dirty. Well, this is sacrificial leadership. I truly believe this. Your teams, your staff, your family, and everyone that you work with need you to get into the trenches with them. They need you to lead from the front lines. Said differently, they want you to model the approach you hope others will follow, and they need each and every one of us to set the example by being the example. The second thing he teaches us is that he refused self-enrichment. What we see here is that he refused to acquire land during the crisis. He wasn't interested in self-enrichment at the expense of others. Currently, the temptation to hike prices and demand more money for essential services and goods is quite frankly overwhelming. There are even large organizations in our nation that have done this despite requests from the government not to. Self-enrichment in times of crisis is inhumane and it is unintegrous. And apart from that, it doesn't build credibility nor favor with God or people. Leaders of significance, though, realize that in times of crisis, their best value is found in serving people, not pillaging them. Nehemiah never even claimed his allowances because he had no intention to increase the burden on the people he led. Instead, he wanted to alleviate it. And that leads us to his third approach. He served the needs of others. And perhaps this is one of the things that we as leaders need to take to heart most. Look at this, leaders. Let's find a way to identify needs and then to meet them. There are greater needs now than ever. Find a way to meet the needs of those around you. Find opportunities to sow generously into credible organizations doing worthwhile work. Find ways to help your neighbors, your staff, your customers, your suppliers. Find ways to help your church even and other non-profit organizations. Think of this, find ways to serve the essential caregivers around you. Why? Because we need to make a difference. And to make a difference, we need to serve people. So as we draw to a close, we find ourselves in a season where so many people are burdened with stresses and worries and financial pressures. There are people filled with fears of the unknown. So what greater time in history do we as leaders have to truly make a significant difference to those who need it most? The people we lead. So let's remember this. Let's lead from the front. Let's refuse self-enrichment and let's serve the needs of others. And as we do, we become significant leaders in our own right. So God bless you, and God bless your leadership this week.